There are a lot of critical issues that will be decided at the polls tomorrow, not only control of Congress, but also what direction will be taken on topics like immigration. Getting out the vote is vital. Joining us to explore why going to the polls is so important, especially for Catholics, is Monsignor Kieran Harrington, the Brooklyn Diocese Vicar for Communications. Monsignor, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be with you, Liz.
We have so much to cover, so I want to begin with this. In a statement released by the USCCB, they highlight the values of forming consciences for faithful as first helping them to do so. Secondly, to teach those entrusted in care of pastors, lay, and religious faithful, all people of goodwill, they say, to contribute to civil and respectful public dialogue. And finally, to shape political choices in the coming election in light of Catholic teachings. I want to begin with you by asking, what is faithful citizenship?
Yeah, the important component for being a citizen of any country is participating in the democracy.
Okay.
And so the question becomes, how do we as Catholics, guided by the teachings of Christ and formed by the gospel, formed by the catechism of the Catholic Church, make application from principles to electing people who are going to represent us in government?
Monsignor, Catholics are urged to vote their conscience with regard to the main issues affecting people of faith. What are those issues, and what exactly does it mean to vote your conscience?
Well, you know, first off, so when we think about voting, you're voting on a lot of different levels, right? In this election, you're going to be voting for a governor, an attorney general, and for a state comptroller, as well as state senators and state assembly people. You're also going to be voting for your congressional member. You're going to be voting for a senator. You're going to be voting for, so there's the votes that are taking place at the federal level and at the state level. You're going to try to apply and say, okay, as a Catholic, what are the primary issues that we're faced with at a state? For instance, with Governor Cuomo, one may ask the question about his position on abortion and say, is there a radical agenda on abortion in New York State? You may make a different calculation when you're voting for a member of the House of Representatives. Maybe you're going to say there, I'm concerned about the question about, because the real matter that they're taking up would be immigration questions. And so I'm going to be concerned about, what does my House member think about immigration questions? In terms of the Senate, you may say, well, okay, I'm voting for somebody who's going to make the decision about the next Supreme Court justice. Who's that person?
Right.
So not all politicians are the same, and how we bring the various issues to bear on these elections is going to matter as well.
So to clarify, what the USCCB does, what our priests do and what our prelates do, is to guide the Catholic consciousness, is to make them ask the important questions, which brings me to this question. When priests speak about politics, many question if the act of informing the faithful about their civic duty comes dangerously close to violating that philosophy of separation between church and state. How do you respond to that?
Well, first off, there's nothing wrong with telling people you have to go out and vote.
Okay.
Tomorrow is election day and you have to go out and vote. There's also nothing wrong, and we'd have to question this, if we were in a country which was pursuing policies which were an affront to human dignity, for instance, slavery. Of course, you would want your elected officials to say, this is an evil and we cannot abide by this evil.
Sure.
So religion does come to bear on matters of public policy. The challenge we face is that who really represents us best? You know, politicians are very adroit at playing to different bases, and so therefore there's really not a Catholic politician. And so we have to kind of try to discern, how is it that we can choose the person who's going to make the best decision, and who's the person who will make the best decisions on a whole host of issues.
A key word there, Monsignor. Thank you. Discernment. Pope Francis said, quote, "Good Catholics immerse themselves in politics by offering the best of themselves so that the leader can govern." In what ways can Catholics, not only here in the Brooklyn Diocese, but throughout our nation, immerse themselves in politics, especially during this very key election?
Yeah, so we talked about voting, and that's a baseline, right? That's the minimum responsibility that I have. But then beyond voting, I have an obligation to be in touch with my elected officials on matters of importance to us. And so this is something where a lot of Catholics kind of fail. We don't speak about matters that are important to us. We feel that on election day, November, we vote once and that's it. The truth of the matter is elections take place in New York, at least in September, when we have a primary election. They take place in November, and then it's the continual engagement with our civic officials on matters that are important. Now, key question is that we think about sometimes matters which are really up to discretion discretion, right? That you may think about some matters that that a person can take different positions on. As Catholics, we're guided by a principle. This would be immigration. Immigration would be a matter where prudential judgment would come into play to say what are the best policies that would involve with immigration. Then there are other matters, for instance, like on human life, the dignity of human life, where there isn't that same discretion. That to pursue a policy that would take a human life or the funding of taking of human lives, that policy, that can never be justified. So as Catholics, we're trying to weigh all these different matters when we're going to vote on election, but also when we're involved in advocacy every day.
Monsignor Harrington, very important perspective and insight there. Thank you so much for being with us today. Tomorrow's a big day.